There are 10 things you simply must know before you ever spend a single penny or a pound on a self-storage site. How do I know this? Well, I know it because I've opened or bought 7 self-storage facilities that currently generate around about £3 million in revenue each year. God, I sound a douche saying that. I'm sorry. For those of you who have followed me for a while know I've made just about every single mistake in the book, and this has ended up costing me thousands and thousands of pounds, and I really wish I could have done things a little bit smarter to speed up the results. So, in this video, I'm going to share with you the 10 things I wish I knew when I started my self-storage journey, so you can avoid the big mistakes that burn beginners before they even open their first site. Mistake number 1, listen up here, it's called the bargain trap. Before I started teaching self-storage, I remember having a conversation with somebody else in the industry who had wasted literally tens of thousands of pounds because she'd fallen into something I now call the bargain trap. Now, this woman was smart. She was intelligent. She'd run businesses before. She'd made money in the past, but what she wanted to do was keep her costs as low as possible. Which sounds sensible, right? But self-storage is a long-term business, and some of the most expensive mistakes I've seen started with someone trying to save money. So she took on a site because it was a bargain. It was low cost, saving her money up front, and on the surface, it seemed like a really good deal. Great terms, i.e. massive rent-free periods. What's not to like? The landlord basically just wanted rid of the site. But here's the problem. She hadn't looked at the major things you need to check before you sign on that dotted line. Because when I'm looking at a site, I have 3 things that I want to check. Number 1, can customers find it easily? Listen, if you have to send a homing pigeon, detailed instructions, 3 landmarks, a carrier pigeon, then it probably isn't a great sign. So that's number 1. Number 2, does the site layout work for the type of storage operation I or you want to create? Just because it's 0.6 acres, it doesn't mean there's 0.6 acres of usable storage land. Here, there could be trees in the way. It could be a funny shape, meaning it's not accessible, meaning not all land is usable. If a customer needs to do a 3.10, I don't know what that is, about 3.10, using a reversing camera and the patience of a saint to get into their unit, it's probably not going to be good. The layout has to make life easy for the customers. It shouldn't create problems. And finally, number 3, I'm looking at whether this could be a good business in the long term, because what matters isn't the site's cost today and profitability today. What matters is what the site can be over the next 5, 10 or 15 years. Self-storage will never get you rich quick, but it will always get you wealthy long term if you play the game correct. Now, obviously, cost does come into it too, but it's not the top thing I'm looking at, unlike this woman who went for the bargain cost on a site it was difficult to find in the middle of nowhere, and then she was left wondering why she couldn't get some customers. So, rather than asking what is the cheapest site I can get, you need to be asking which site gives me the best long-term opportunity. But even when you found the perfect site, it's only part way there, because I've seen people secure sites that ticked all the boxes on paper and still struggle to fulfill their real potential. And the reason why leads directly onto my next mistake. Mistake number 2, build it and they will come. And by the way, stick around to the end of this mistake because I'll explain how I made the exact mistake. Embarrassingly so. So stick around to the end. I've seen people find what they thought was the perfect site. The rent was reasonable, the facility looked amazing. On paper, the numbers looked like they were going to work. So they opened the doors and waited for the customers. And nothing happened. To be honest, that was me, and I'm going to share that in a minute because we've all made mistakes. The problem was they never really stopped to ask where those customers are coming from. You can have the best site in the world, the best containers, the most fancy apps to enter the building, the best security, the best marketing, but if there isn't demand in the area, you're basically screwed. You need people with possessions to fill the units. So you've got to look at things like how many people live nearby. Are there businesses that might need storage? Are there tradespeople, housing developments? And also, what is the competition nearby? To be fair, this is a big one for me. If you open a self-storage site across the road from another self-storage facility in the same area, that could potentially mean it's overcrowded, and then you're going head to head for the same customers from day one. And to be fair, that's a headache that you probably don't need. One of the biggest mistakes I see people is choosing locations on what's available rather than what's viable. Ooh, it's good that. Those are two very different things. Just because a site is available, it doesn't mean it's a good opportunity. What you're looking for is real-world proof there is already a need for storage in that area. Plus, what is your competition like? So one of the first questions I'm asking myself is, if I opened here, who am I competing against in a 1 and 3 mile radius? And how can I be better solution for the customers? What can I do differently? Because if I can't answer that, then it's a big red flag. Now, I told you I made this mistake when I opened one of my sites compared to the other site. And I'll quickly tell you about it. It was Clough Road versus Mansfield. Now, Clough Road was an amazing location. However, it was very, very competitive. And I'll be honest, it took a lot longer to fill than I really wanted it to. However, Mansfield, on the other hand, was a great location, but there wasn't very many competitors around. So what I got in 3 months opening Mansfield in terms of customers, it took me a year to get at Clough Road. So I've made this mistake. I am talking from experience. We need to vet the area before we open. So here's the thing, even if you found the right site, the right location, that still doesn't guarantee you success, because you could completely underestimate what is waiting for you next. And that's where a lot of beginners get caught out, which leads me nicely on to mistake number 3. Mistake number 3, numero 3, and pin your logos back because this is something I'm really passionate about. Trying to save pennies and it actually ends up costing you pounds. I have a client who found the perfect site, a great location, limited competition, and thousands of cars passing each day. You couldn't handpick a better site. However, all good stories start with a however, don't they? The deal was nearly done with the landlord, but he wanted £52,000 a year rent, and my client only wanted to pay £50,000. The landlord and my client went back and forth for 6 months, arguing over £2,000. My advice was simple. I said, listen, this site will make you over £100,000 a year. Just accept the landlord's offer and get this place open as quick as humanly possible. If I'm right, and by the way, I am 100% right, in the 6 months you've been arguing over £2,000, you, my client, has missed out on 6 months' profit, which equals a cool £50,000. So he's been arguing over 2, but he's missed out on 50. I am very, very pleased to say, by the way, my client has taken my advice and the site is very, very, very close to opening, and I am so pleased for them both. It's an amazing site and I'm just overwhelmed that it's finally got there. Anyway, mistake number 4 is where a lot of newbies actually slip up. Mistake number 4, falling in love with the wrong woman. No, I'm kidding. Falling in love with the wrong numbers. Now, this is probably one of the biggest mistakes on this entire list because this is where I see people getting excited about the wrong numbers. And forgive me if this is very basic, but I feel like I need to put it out there. They'll see a self-storage site doing or generating £100,000 a year in revenue, or £250,000 a year, or even more. And immediately they start imagining what they're going to do with all that money. But revenue and profit are two very, very different things, my friends. And if you don't understand the differences, you can make some expensive decisions. Think of it like this. Revenue is vanity and profit is sanity. Because revenue tells you how much money is coming in, but profit tells you how much you're actually keeping. In self-storage, there's costs that beginners don't even think about. You've got rent, you've got business rates, you've got water, you've got electric, you've got insurance, you've got advertising. I love this. Software, maintenance, staff costs, office costs. You've got potentially a lot of costs there, and a whole load of other things to pay out that just don't show up in that revenue figure. Let's look at one of my own sites, Willoughby, so you can see what I mean. Last month, the site brought in just over £92,000 in revenue. Now, this looks absolutely fantastic, but now let's start taking off the cost. The rent was £17,000. Yes, £17,000 a month. The business rates were 3,191. Utilities were 1,600. Advertising was 2,800. For Willoughby, the share of the head office costs was £25,855. That's things like staffing, software, insurance, maintenance, health and safety, accountancy fees, vehicle costs, etc. And once everything has been paid for, the actual cost was $43,913. Now, obviously, don't get me wrong, that's still an absolutely fantastic result. But it's very, very different from the 92 grand people were getting excited about just a couple of minutes ago. That's why whenever I'm looking at a potential site to open, I'm looking at how much profit there is after everything has been paid. So the lesson here is know your expenses. But understanding the numbers is all very well and good, but if you haven't got the next thing right, things can still go badly wrong. And by the way, I actually think this is the perfect time to say to you guys, look, if you're enjoying this, then don't forget to subscribe to my newsletter, mrselfstorage.com, and I document my whole journey, Monday to Friday, give you all my conversions, all the revenue, everything, you name it, I give it out there. Right, mistake number 5. Believe it or not, customers, I can't believe I'm saying this, don't buy storage. Let me explain. Imagine you've just split up with your partner. You've suddenly got a house full of furniture that needs somewhere to go, and you need somewhere safe to put it all fast. At that moment, you aren't spending the next 3 weeks comparing every self-storage site in a 20-mile radius to save a few quid a month. No, you're probably not doing that. You're looking for somewhere that can solve your problem right now. That's why one of the biggest mistakes beginners make is assuming the cheapest price will automatically win, because it won't. Most customers aren't buying storage. They're buying a solution to a problem. And the bigger the problem, the less important a small difference in price will be. And it's not just people going through a breakup. The same thing happens when somebody's moving house or renovating, or they've just completely run out of room to store all their stuff. People pay for convenience, and if they've got expensive things, they'll pay extra for security and insurance as well. Talking of insurance, at Willoughby, over £20,000 a month of the £92,000 was from people adding insurance. It's crazy. The profit margins are insane, by the way, for insurance. It's a win for you because you're generating extra revenue, and it's a win for the customers because their stuff's insured. When you've been in the industry as long as I have, these things are worth thinking about. It's a long-term gain. You've got to think over and above just renting out storage unit. What extras can you add on to help people? What other things can you offer? Which actually leads me on to my next point. And if you get this thing right, it will skyrocket your revenue and profit. Mistake numero 6, the expensive guess. One of the things I love about business is that customers don't always behave the way you expect them to. And trust me, self-storage is no different. I saw this one self-storage operator spend months planning every single detail, only to find out that one thing they were absolutely convinced would work, it didn't. The problem is these guys were making assumptions about their customers. And you know that old saying, when you assume, it makes an ass out of you and me. These guys just made one basic mistake. They hadn't looked at their data. They didn't look at the needs of their customers. They had basically bought smaller units, loads of smaller units and not very many bigger units. 6 months in, and the bigger units were filling up fast. In fact, at one point, there was a waiting list for the bigger units, but the smaller units were sitting there doing absolutely diddly swat. It wasn't the end of the world, and I helped them figure out a solution, but it cost them time and money for a problem that was avoidable. They basically wanted the customers to use smaller units rather than the bigger ones. But we can't assume that. You've got to build your business around what customers actually want rather than what you think they want. The same thing applies to pricing, to promotions, to marketing. If you're spending money, by the way, on Google Ads, targeting one type of customer, but those inquiries don't convert into paying customers, then that is the data telling you something. You've got to look at what is actually happening, not what you hope would happen or want to happen. I guess my point is this. Don't fall in love with your assumptions. Fall in love with data and facts. I love that. And that's great while the business is small. The next challenge comes when things actually start working, because that's when a lot of people accidentally create a completely different problem for the business. And that leads me nicely onto mistake number 7. Mistake numero 7, the freedom trap. So, you've built the business, money's coming in, things are looking hunky-dory, and you've now got time for all those holidays you planned when you were sweating blood, tears, sweat, blood, I don't know, when you was in your old 9-to-5 job. You have freedom. Not necessarily. Now, bear with me. If you don't plan things right, then you'll be working more hours than you did before, because without the right systems in place, every customer inquiry will end up going through you, and that's not what we want. Anytime there's a problem, you'll find you're getting in your car at 9 p.m. on a Sunday evening to sort out a gate that stopped working, or a customer who's locked themselves out, or some other problem that couldn't wait until Monday morning. And before you know it, you've accidentally created another job for yourself, another job that could be plus 40 hours. Now, obviously, when you're getting started, you're going to be involved in the business. That is just normal. But there's a big difference between building a business and becoming trapped inside one. Because if a business can't function without you constantly being involved, then you don't really own the business. The business owns you, and you have a glorified job that you didn't want. My Beverley site, to be perfectly honest, now runs without anybody sitting there all day long. A customer can find the site online, sign up, make a payment, and gain access without me or any of my team members needing to actually be there. In fact, I've said it before on this channel, and I'll say it again, the site takes less than 2 hours a week to run and makes over £200,000 a year. Why? Because we've set up the right systems. Now, please don't think this is me saying there's no work involved in self-storage, because of course there is. I need to put it out there. But if you put in the upfront work, creating systems and procedures and using software, it makes operating a manless site a heck of a lot easier. People often ask me, is self-storage passive? And to be honest, the answer is no. But it's a lot more passive when you've built the right systems, because every system you build today saves you time tomorrow. Nearly smashed that. Whether that's online signups, automated payments, remote access, smart security, or clear operational processes. The goal isn't to make the perfect business, believe it or not. The goal is to stop yourself becoming the bottleneck. Because the more the business depends on you, the harder the business becomes to grow and the harder it is to sell. And the irony is that many people start a business because they want more freedom. Then they build something that gives them less freedom, which is why it's so important to think about systems from the very beginning. But, and it's a big but here, that's exactly when a lot of people get caught out, not because they've done anything wrong, but because they've taken their eye off the prize and stopped paying attention to something that's changing right in front of them. Right in front of them. Sorry, I feel like I'm getting mad at you now. Mistake number 8. Number 8. The thing everyone tries to avoid, including me. Now, I'm about to talk about bookkeeping and taxes. Oh, I can already some people think, great, that sounds exciting. And look, I get it. Nobody gets into self-storage because they're passionate about spreadsheets and taxes. And that's exactly why the mistake catches so many beginners out, because they treat it as something they will sort out later until it costs them money. I'm embarrassed to say, by the way, I was one of those people, believe it or not. When I first started out in business, I used to keep my receipts in a shoebox. I know you'll find that pretty easy to believe. It really did happen. And that's only the receipts that I actually remembered to keep as well. It's so embarrassing when I think about it. And I hate to think about all those tax receipts I lost because I didn't put business expenses through the books. Stupid, I know. When you don't do that, you can end up losing thousands upon thousands pretty easily. Look, I'm not an accountant and tax rules may vary depending on where you live. Just a quick caveat, so you basically don't sue me, bro. So always take professional advice, basically. Okay, the boring bit over. But what I can tell you is this. The most successful investors I know understand their numbers, full stop. They know what's coming in and they know what's going out. They know what they are spending money on and they keep accurate records from day one. Apologies again if I'm teaching you to suck eggs. Good records make tax and business decisions a lot easier. Yes, it really is boring, but I promise you, I can't believe I'm saying this. My dean 10 years ago would be embarrassed about this. Yes, it's boring, but it really does work. You can literally save thousands of pounds through tax relief and allowances if you've kept good records and you've got the right advice. It's so much easier to do this from the very start than to spend the entire weekend 6 years later trying to figure out why the bank account doesn't match your spreadsheet. And trust me, that's not a fun way to spend a Sunday or Saturday evening. And I speak from bitter experience. I've been in those trenches and it's not pretty. It makes me want to cry when I think about the money I lost early on. I know I've got to get over it because it was a long time ago. Anyway, let's move on. There's a but here. Of course there's a but. But even if you have great systems, great records, and great financial controls, there's another mistake that catches out a lot of investors and operators, and that's mistake number 9. Mistake number 9, the moving target. One of the most dangerous words in business is currently. Currently, demand is strong. Currently, occupancy is high. Currently, there aren't many competitors. Currently, everything looks blooming rosy and fantastic. The problem is that currently doesn't always last forever. It would be great if it did, but sadly it doesn't. So, what do we do about it? Well, let me tell you a little story. I was going to open in a place called Lincoln. Everything looked good currently. There wasn't many competitors, but the problem is that there was a lot of people who knew that this place was undersaturated and well worth opening. And so I heard along the grapevine that there was other competitors going to open. And to be honest, that worried me a little bit. I looked into the location, I looked at the population, I looked at the demand for self-storage, I looked at the current competition, and I looked at the future competition, and I decided to walk away. And I'm really, really glad I did. Now, don't get me wrong, the companies in Lincoln are still making very, very good money, because in self-storage, most operators make money. But you can either make money the easy way or it can be a little bit more difficult. Now, those operators are probably having to work a little bit harder to get the customers. They're still getting the customers and they're still making money, but they're working harder than I have in other locations. So the key here is be ready to walk away. The longer you're in business, the more you realize that success isn't about chasing every single opportunity. Sometimes it's about saying no to opportunities. It's about knowing which opportunities to go for and which opportunities to walk away from. If you make the wrong decision, it can cost you big on time and big on money, which is where our final mistake on the list comes in. Mistake number 10, the last one, the hard way. The final mistake on the list has probably cost people more time, more money, and more frustration than all the other mistakes put together. And most people don't even know they're making it. In fact, a lot of people wear it like a badge of honor. They think it's a strength, something to be proud of. But in reality, it often ends up making their life much harder than it needs to be. Most business builders are independent by nature. We are. They like problem solving. They like figuring things out for themselves. And that's usually a good thing. But there's a big difference between being independent and making things tough. Think about this. Every single mistake on this list has one thing in common. Somebody else has already made it. Hello. No, I started coughing then. And yet I still see people spending months, years, even trying to figure everything out from scratch themselves. I get asked a lot if building a business in self-storage is easy. And the simple answer is no, of course not. It's not a magic gold mine that automatically springs up. You've got a lot to learn. But working 40 or 50 or 60 hours a week in a job you probably hate isn't easy either. Getting up every morning building somebody else's dream isn't easy. Spending the next 10 years wondering what if isn't easy. Most worthwhile things in life aren't easy. The question isn't whether something is hard. The question is whether it's worth it. Oh my God, I got tingles. And if you decide it's worth it, the next question is, how do I get there faster? There's no prizes at all for taking the longest route. There's no trophy for taking and making every mistake yourself. And there's certainly no extra reward for spending years figuring out what somebody else could have taught you in a few weeks. Now, don't get me wrong. You still have to keep going when things get difficult, but learning from people who've already done what you're trying to do is priceless. Experience and success leaves clues. The right mentor can save you years of mistakes. The right network can open doors you didn't even know existed. And sometimes a 5-minute conversation can save you a 6-figure mistake. Your network really is your net worth. And I didn't really used to believe that before, but it really is. The smartest people aren't the ones who know everything. They're the ones who never stop learning from people around them. Because no matter how good you are, no matter how experienced you become, you'll always move faster when you're surrounded by people who push you forward rather than hold you back. At the end of the day, every mistake we've talked about today in this video is avoidable. It's not easy, but it is avoidable. And if someone else can help you avoid these mistakes, why wouldn't you talk to them? Why wouldn't you listen to them? Why wouldn't you learn from them? As somebody who's made all of these mistakes myself, hopefully I've helped you out in this video too. So now that you know what mistakes to avoid, you're already ahead of 99% of people looking to get into self-storage, but knowing what to avoid and what to do instead are two completely different things. So make sure you watch this video next. I don't know where it is, because I'll show you the right steps to start your self-storage business in 2026. This is what I wish I knew when I first started.